Bismillah walhamdulillah wa salatu wa salam ala rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in wa ba'd. This is a series that I'm going to be doing every Friday, inshaAllah ta'ala. And in this series, I'll be talking about the different phases that a person will go through to learn the Arabic language. So the primary focus in this series is going to be on learning the Arabic language. So what I'll be doing is I'll be going through the different stages of development, I guess you could say. From the starter. What I mean by starter, of course, I mean that the person who already knows how to read. So I want to focus on the person now. He already has attained the ability to read the Arabic language, but now he wants to understand what he is reading and also what he's hearing. So I want to go through the different stages and talk about how, the methods that I use and the methods of the people that I study with, that I saw that were the most successful amongst the people. Not just myself, but also the people that I studied with and the people that the people that were around me that studied Arabic. Because obviously, being in a large place for Talib al-Ilm, you get to see a lot of the good, the bad, and the ugly, basically. So you start to see certain people that they study, but they don't seem to get it, and then you want to find out like what's going on with this person. So ask questions, talk to the person. What are you doing? What are you not doing? Try to find out what the person is doing wrong. And at the same time, you look at the successful people, the people that are like progressing rather fast throughout their studies, and then they're already speaking and understanding within like 6 to 8 months of being in the place, and now they're like sitting down reading books in Arabic, memorizing books in Arabic, and memorizing the Quran and progressing quickly. You want to know what this person is doing right, so you start to compile advice over the years. So this is basically now, these videos will be a summary of all that, my experience, inshallah. So first off, I want to give some brief advice for the person who doesn't know how to read Arabic. And like I said, I'm not going to go in depth in this because this was something, alhamdulillah, I didn't necessarily have an issue with, because I became Muslim when I was late 14, early 15 years old. And I just learned to read Arabic right away. It was one of the first things that was taught to me. So right away, immediately, I'm memorizing Surah Al-Fatiha. I'm memorizing different surah from the Quran when I was still like a sophomore in high school. So for me, it wasn't really much of I didn't see it as a challenge. But for some people, especially people that are getting started on the Arabic language in their older years, they might start to see, they have that challenge. So what I want to focus, just some brief advice, and without going too far in depth, is that the first thing that you need to do is you need to sit down with a person who is going to teach you the alphabet and focus on making sure that you have the correct pronunciation of each letter. Like for example, you need to be able to differentiate between a qaf and a kaf. You need to differentiate between a dal, a zal, alright, and also a dad. You need to differentiate between a sin and a sad. The different sounds. And once these sounds become easy for you, and also, of course, one of the bigger problems that people in the West face is between the hamza, which is the and the ayn, so these types of things, you have to really, really sit down and make sure that you focus on these things. It's tedious. Wallahi, it's tedious. For me, I didn't go through that. I didn't do that, and I had horrible pronunciation. When I read the Quran, there was a lot to be desired when I was younger. But I tried, the purpose, I could read it, but the pronunciation was horrid. But I had to learn it later on. So maybe like in my 20s, and I started like recognizing the difference between the sounds. It's better to get that out of the way in the beginning. Sit down, go through the struggle. It's a headache, man, but you got to keep in mind, number one, Arabic is, I would say, depending on the depth that you're trying to learn Arabic in, Arabic is the most difficult language on the face of the earth. That's no doubt the most difficult language. But that's if you go real in depth into the language. Alright, but here's the thing. When you do something for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and you're doing it to understand the Kitab Allah, and you're doing it to understand the Sunnah of the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Allah will make it easy for you. Now it's not going to be easy. You're not just going to like breeze right through it. Some people do, But I'm going to tell you one thing, that the people that breeze through things, they don't normally continue very much. They don't really, if you notice, like a lot of students that we study with that learn really quickly, they didn't really continue, because it got boring for them, because they were just picking things up too easy. It was the people that struggled. They started off like, very slow, but they kept developing, they kept pushing themselves and pushing themselves, because those people, they had to have a routine that went over time. It was a long time. So once because of them pushing themselves, they had that drive to keep learning. So that routine kept them now where once it did start to get easy, this was their life, so they're not stopping now. And they continued. So a lot of the people that you see that like have that highly developed, and this is what I really want you to focus on. A lot of the people that you see that developed a lot in the Arabic language or in any science in the religion, whether it was ilm al-hadith, whether it was fiqh, whatever it was, I guarantee you those people were the people that had the troubles in the beginning. Those were the people that struggled in the beginning. The people that didn't struggle, the people that found it easy, they memorized easy. I mean, just for me, when I started studying, I started memorizing the Quran in 1999 in Atlanta, Georgia. And before that, I never thought that, Americans could memorize the Quran, I just thought like we could just memorize a few surah. I was like, this is for the Arabs, I never thought it. But when I was in Atlanta and there was a brother he had just come back from Yemen, and I started memorizing with him. So first off, he motivated me to memorize. I didn't memorize with him. I was memorizing on my own. But that was the motivation that I needed. But it would take a long time. Like just to memorize one page of the Quran, I was taking like 5 days. I was reading each page 100 times every single day for 5 days. So it was on the 5th day that I would have it down. Like I could see the page in my memory. I could literally just write it out from what I saw in my memory just from looking at that page so much. And I kept doing that for a long time. So I finished like Juz Amma, Juz Tabarak, and then I started on Surah Al-Baqarah. And it took me like a year to memorize Surah Al-Baqarah because I just kept doing the same thing. It's like some pages they would take 7 days. It just wouldn't stick. It just would not stick because the language, something about it, because you got to understand, we're not Arabs. So this language is not in our heads. Like, the Arabs, they grow up, they hear the Quran, they hear the language. So it's already, it's kind of there, but it's not there. They haven't memorized it. So when they do sit down and memorize it, they'll pick it up a lot faster than we will because we didn't grow up listening to Quran. We grew up listening to Tupac. So you got to keep that in mind, or whatever it is that you listen to. I grew up in the 90s. So the point is that, you have to it's going to be a struggle, and you just got to recognize that and be ready to work for that. Because I'm telling you, the people that got it easy, those people, they don't continue very much. Very, very, very rarely. So you sit down with a person, get the letters, get the right pronunciation of the letters. And once you got the pronunciation and you can combine the letters and you know what they look like in the beginning of the word, in the middle of the word, and at the end of the word, and you can read. You sit down and you read with a person, maybe 2 pages a day, 3 pages a day, until eventually you can sit down and you can read juz a day, just a juz a day, just reading. You can do your memorization because you have to start memorizing Quran. That helps a lot with your learning of Arabic, and I'll get into that later. But the main thing is you just want to get the fluency, the fluency. And the more you read the Quran, the more those words, they keep going in your head, and they keep going in your head. And so you're going through the whole Mus'haf every single month, once a month. And you do that for a period of time, while you're learning Arabic. And obviously when you start memorizing, you also have your revision. So you just have, like, for example, like after Fajr, you just sit down and you read the one juz, you go into your memorization, you do what you got to do. And then throughout the day, you spend the rest of your day just revising what you've already memorized. So trust me, that language just flowing through your head, it's going to be flowing through your head. And that's how you start to pick it up a lot faster. A lot of the people that don't learn Arabic quick, they learn it because they don't memorize. That's one failure. They don't memorize and they don't write a lot. You have to memorize. Memory is the key. I'm not saying that you can, that if you don't memorize that you won't learn Arabic, but we're talking about if you really, really want to get fluent and you don't want to be the type of person who's like searching for the word in your head or trying to translate something, then you need to start memorizing. All right, so now, once you've sat down and you've, you got the correct pronunciation, you're reading the Quran on a regular basis, you have like a little memorization program. Now you want to actually get into the language and start learning the language, learning what you're reading, learning what, and how to write. And the writing, I'm going to deal with that separately because that in its own, but I will just give some brief advice is just write a lot. That's it. Just write a lot in the beginning. It's just like running or doing anything that you want to do. If you want to get good at like doing pull-ups, you just got to keep doing pull-ups. You can't just like sit back and say I'm gonna get good at doing pull-ups by doing like dumbbell presses or something. No, you have to do pull-ups. So writing is the same thing. It's a tedious task, but you know, for you to get easy in writing, you're gonna have to just keep writing. Get a book of ta'bir, which is generally, you know, like the books like Arabiya Bayna Yadayk, or the books from the university, Imam Muhammad ibn Saud University. These types of books, they're called books of ta'bir, which basically is conversational Arabic. Because the one mistake that you do not want to do, and I'm going to start with the mistake that you don't want to do, is that you do not want to go in and start focusing on nahu, which is Arabic grammar in the beginning. Because number one, you don't even have the language. You can't even, you know, you can't right now, you're not at the level where you can even make a sentence. So there's no benefit in you studying the rules of making a sentence. Right now, what you want to do is you just want to see the actual speech in Arabic, and you want to kind of like memorize the speech. Memorize it. So the ta'bir books, which is the books of like conversation, are probably the best. They are the best in the beginning stage. Because what you really want to focus on in the beginning is you just want to focus on getting vocabulary. And you want to know, like, recognize how the word changes. So for example, like, you know, kharaja, yakhruju, khurujan, okay, like this. You want to know like how it goes from the present tense to the past tense. Kharajtu, kharajta, kharajti, kharajtuma, kharajtum, kharajtunna, kharaja, wa kharajat, wa kharaju, wa kharaja, wa kharajn. You want to see how it changes in the past. Okay, you want to know these types of things first, because this is the most important thing, because this is your speech. This is the language that you're going to be using on a daily basis when you're in an Arabic speaking country, and it's also the language that you're going to be reading through the Quran and through the Sunnah. So you need to know the verbs and how they change and how they go to the masadir, which are the nouns. For example, like kharaja yakhruju, khurujan, khuruj. Now the khuruj is what you call the masdar, which is the noun. And you want to know this because this starts to give you more vocabulary. And if you have a good teacher in Arabic, like I did, you know, alhamdulillah, was blessed with a very, 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 very good brother and a very, very strong brother in the Arabic language when I was in Yemen, which is Abdul Hakim al-Amriki. So, and his method was probably the best method, and he's the one that got most of the people speaking Arabic a lot faster. And he had a lot of patience with us, you know. So you need a teacher with a lot of patience. So what he did is he would take each scale of the verb, and he would teach it to us one by one, and he would only focus on that scale. So like for you know, and the scales of sarf is what I'm talking about here, is like the fa'ala, fa'ula, fa'ila, yaf'alu, yaf'ulu, yaf'ilu. I know this sound like Chinese to a lot of people now, but you'll start to see it, because this, by understanding this language now and what's going on, you start to increase your vocabulary tenfold. Because once you can recognize the root of the word and what it's derived from, then you can see, like, okay, for example, kharaja, it means to go out, to leave. But now if I see a word like, for example, takharraj. Now takharraj, it means to graduate. Yani takharraju min al-madrasa, takharraju min al-jami'ah. They graduated from the school, from high school, or they graduated from the university. Now, because you're looking at you can see the root word, and you start to see the extra, you know, what's built onto the root word. You know that the root word is kharaja. So you know that something in this meaning of this word has to do with leaving. So it will stick in your head now that, okay, they left the school. Now, when do you leave the school? You leave the school when you graduate. Also, if you look at the word like istakhraja, it means to take something out. And also, kharraja. Like خرجت قلما من الشنطة or من الحقيبة or من الجيب. So it means to take something out. And استخرج, it can also mean to like extract, to extract something from something else, because it's being taken out. So it still has the meaning of the root word. You understand? So the same thing with like alima, allama, to teach, ta'allama, to learn. And these types of things. So as you start to learn the different scales, which is the most important thing for you to know in the beginning, because even the Arabic dictionaries, the majority of them, except for Al-Qamus al-Muhit, is set up in that way, in that in that it's organized in that fashion. It's organized based on the root word and then the different scales, and then it goes through the different masadir, which are the different nouns that you take. Because not only that, but you also have other issues. You have, like, for example, like the ism fa'il. You know, so I can say kharajtu min al-bayt, which is a jumla al-fi'liya, which is a verbal sentence. And then, or you could say ana kharijun min al-bayt, which is now as a jumla al-ismiya, because you use the ism fa'il. So all of this, like, you start to just increase your vocabulary tenfold. This is what you need to focus on in the beginning. And most of the books of ta'bir, that's what they focus on. If you notice, they focus on the thulathi, which is the 3-letter verbs. Alright, dhahaba, kharaja, daraba, qatala, like these types of verbs, the basic verbs that you're going to need in your everyday speech. And then, of course, they'll start to go on to more complex verbs throughout the book. But you need a teacher that actually knows how to focus on that and teaches it in that way. Because at this point, all you're trying to do is just try to gather, you're trying to get a bank account of vocabulary, because that's what you need. Because if you, like, sit down and you try to memorize words, if you're memorizing the words, you'll start to understand things from the Quran. But if you sit down and just study grammar, you're not going to understand anything. You might understand, like, okay, this is a maf'ulun bi, and this, you know, but you're not understanding what you're reading. So the main thing is just to focus on the vocabulary. Get a very, very, very big bank account of vocabulary, where now you can sit down and you can start to recognize these words and what they mean. And even the words that you don't know, but you can recognize the root words. The root word, you can recognize the root, and then you can start to, like, deduce the meaning. You know, where you're like, okay, I think it means this, I think it, but it helps you a lot when you're reading, especially like sometimes, like if I'm reading in a taxi, I don't know a word, I don't have time to, like, take out my phone and look it up on or Google, or wait till I get home to look it up in a dictionary, because I probably already forgotten the word by then. So just knowing the root word, and I can kind of like get an idea what the meaning is and just keep reading, because I can look at the context. And that's another thing, that once you get a lot of vocabulary, you can see the context and you can understand the meaning from the context. But you can't do that if you're only focusing on grammar. So the next thing is, and this is another important thing, and this is what my teacher taught me, and I'm going to explain this to you. And this is where you need, at least, if you don't have a teacher, you at least need somebody to sit down with you and correct what you're going to do right now, what I'm going to tell you. If you're reading through a book of ta'bir, number one, if you're doing this alone or whether you're doing with a teacher, it doesn't really matter. Write out every single exercise in a notebook. Write it out. This is how you're going to get your practice in writing. I don't care if it takes 3 hours, dedicate 3 hours of your life to, like, learning the language, because that's what it requires. That's what it requires. Do what you can do. You know, do what you can do. But you have to write that stuff out. Don't just do the exercises in them, but don't ever write in a book. Never write in a book. Never. I mean, if you need to take notes, write it in a notebook, but do not write in those books, because then later on, inshallah, you can pass the book on to somebody else. And also, sometimes if you have an issue with an exercise, you can come back and redo it, and you don't have the answers there. You know, so it's better not to write in a book. Write out all the exercises, all the complete sentences. Write them out in a notebook. All right. Now, once you've done that, and you're going to come across words that you don't know, what you want to do is you want to take those words and you want to write them into sentences that, in Arabic, obviously, that you will be using. You do not want to translate. Do not get in the habit of saying dhahaba, to go, kharaja, or to leave, ta'allama, to learn. Don't get in this habit, because what you're doing is you're training your mind to become a tool for translation. And you don't want to do that, because the only way that you're going to get in good in Arabic is you need to, like, be able to think and memorize the meaning of that word in Arabic. So what you need to do is you need to take that vocabulary word and you need to put it into a context that you can understand, that every time that you look at that sentence, you can remember the meaning of the word. So, like, for example, you got a vocabulary word, let's say, let me think. Let's just say that you're trying to remember the word ta'allam. Okay? Easy, right? So you can say, like, for example, put it into a sentence. You write it out in a sentence. تعلمت اللغة العربية في المدرسة. أو تعلمت اللغة العربية في المعهد. Or تعلمت اللغة العربية في البيت أو في المسجد. wherever. But the point is, you put it into a sentence. You go to somebody, you check the sentence, you make sure that you're getting, because you haven't studied grammar yet, so you need to make sure that you get like, تعلمت اللغة العربية في المدرسة أو في المسجد أو في البيت. You need to make sure that you're getting somebody that can put those, the harakat, the fatha and the dhamma and the kasra on the words, so you're saying them correctly. Right now, you don't need to know why it's got a fatha or why it's got a dhamma or why it's got a kasra, but right now, just memorize it. And once you get like a couple sentences, 5, 6 sentences, you just want to keep reading those sentences over and over and over and over and over again. You can put them in a question. Like for example, you can write أين تعلمت اللغة العربية؟ تعلمت اللغة العربية في المسجد. And you can write this and just read it over and over and over again. So what happens now is once you put these words, these new words into a sentence, you're not going to go back and think the translation. Every time that you have an issue of like you wanting to remember the word, if you can't remember in your head, you go back to your notebook where you have the sentences and you reread the sentence and then you remember, okay, that's what that word means. That's what it means, okay? For example, like kharraja, okay, kharraja, which means to take out. So like I gave a sentence previously, kharrajtu al-qalam min jaybi, أو kharrajtu hatifi min jaybi. And you put this into a sentence. You put it because it's easy to remember, because if you can remember jayb, you know that it's a pocket, and you remember this, and you know that the only way that you can get something is that you have to take it out. So it helps you to remember that kharraja, it means to take out. Okay, to take out. So I mean things like this, you have to put them into sentences, and then you keep constantly going back and rereading those sentences and rereading those sentences. If you want to, you can rewrite the sentences. And this gives you also some more practice in writing. And this is for the beginning stage. So in the beginning stage, all you're going to start with is you're going to start with, like, for example, like the basic vocabulary. If you haven't learned it yet. Like, for example, like ذهب, خرج, ضرب, قتل. I know, but these examples, they come in all the books of language, unfortunately, beating and killing, but Allah musta'an. But things like that, you don't want to focus on the bigger like istakhraja, istaghfara, you're going to need to know that later, but these are the istaf'ala verbs. You want to focus only on, like, for example, like jalasa, akala, shariba, and you want to make sure that like shariba, yashrabu, jalasa, yajlisu, you want to make sure that you're memorizing it. So when you're writing, for example, let's say that you're writing sentences, so you want to write, for example, like jalastu ma'a shaykh, أو جلست مع أصحابي, and then you can say يجلس أحمد كل يوم مع شيخه. But you want to get a sentence where you're doing the fi'l mudari and the fi'l al-madi, so you can see how they're changing. So you start to memorize. Like for example, like akala, because it's got a hamza in the beginning, it's easy when you say akala ya'kulu. But what about when you can't say akulu, you say akulu. So these types of things, that's why you need a good teacher. A very good teacher. Find a teacher in your locality, wherever you're at, who can sit down and make sure that you correct these sentences. All right. And he puts them correctly with the right, the fatha, the dhamma, and you read them. You read these sentences to him and make sure that you're reading them correctly with the correct pronunciation, and then you go on your own, you read them over and over and over again. It's not what I used to do, what I still do even till today, alhamdulillah, is I have like a little bean counter. I'll pause the video and I'll show it to you. Alright, this is what it looks like. It's just a little counter. You can get this at any of these stationery stores. And all you do is it just counts. So what you want to do is you want to set like a number. For example, let's say that you want to read your sentences like 50 times a day. So this way you can just read, and you just, every time you read, you just keep clicking until it hits 50. That way you don't need to focus on how many times you're reading. You can see it, because it's right there, as you can see. So just click. I do you can do the same thing with the Quran, do the same thing when you're memorizing a hadith. And it's good because it helps you to keep track of how many times it takes you to read something to memorize it. Because you want to keep that in your mind, because you want to look at the types of foods you eat. For example, like for me, if I drink coffee, I don't memorize things quickly. It might take, if it takes me like 30 times to memorize something, now it's going to take me like 50, 65. But I know that because I keep track of how many times I have to read it over and over and over to get it to stick. So you want to constantly focus on that, because you need to know yourself. Nobody's going to know how know you better than you, but you need to focus on yourself. And certain foods that you eat that might make your memory weak, certain foods that you eat that made it stronger. Like, for example, if I drink green tea on a regular basis, my memory is stronger than when I drink coffee. If I don't drink anything, no coffee, no green tea, my memory is stronger. So you want to focus on these things, and then that way, when you're memorizing, you stay away from the things that make your memory weak or make you lazy. Sometimes you just don't want to study that day. Your mind's foggy and cloudy, maybe because you ate too many ramen noodles or something like that, or like MSG you ate at a Chinese restaurant. It messes up your memory, and it messes up your ability to think clearly. So you want to stay away from all of that. But that's a lesson for another day. But right now, the main thing is focus on those sentences, focusing on those verbs. You want to do that for like 6 months. You want to basically just go through the different scales. And like I said, if you have the right teacher, the teacher he'll take you gradually through it. So you start off with the first one, which is fa'ala, fa'ula, fa'ila. And then, of course, you go to fa'ala, and then you go to fa'ala, and then you go one by one. So you want to do this little by little. And you're getting each more and more words. It depends now if you're dedicated full time to this, or if you're doing it like part time because maybe you're in America working. If you're in America working, I'd say like a year of doing this, and you'll have a good understanding. You'll start to be able to understand a good portion of what you read. You're still gonna have issues with the grammar, but I'm telling you, don't let anybody stick that in your head that you're gonna go study grammar. Everybody that I know that focus on grammar in the beginning, they had a very, very hard time understanding Arabic. And those people that don't read books, they don't, because they just don't have that type of understanding in the Arabic language. Just focus on what you're doing. You have a plan. And especially when you see the success in that plan, don't change it for anybody. Don't listen to people's advice. If it's working for you, keep doing it. If it's not working for you, then that's when you need to start looking for people's advice. But make sure that you're doing everything properly right. Focus on the sentences. Focus on getting just vocabulary words, nouns, different nouns that you need. For example, like bait. You don't necessarily need to know that, like, for example, like bata yabitu, which means to stay the night in a place. And then the word bait comes from, bata yabitu. You don't need to know that in the beginning. All you need to know is bait. It means my house. So now you have dhahabtu ila bayti. Dhahabtu ila bayti Ahmed. And you could put it in sentences like this and memorize it, and this will start to help you a lot. So you don't need to know where every single word comes from. Like certain nouns like mat'am, same thing. Mat'am, it means restaurant. And if you want to put it in a sentence, then you can say akaltu fil mat'am. Akaltu fil mat'am. If you want to put like another noun, like for example like chicken, akaltu dajajatan fil mat'am. So now you have I ate chicken in the restaurant. You don't need to know that mat'am comes from at'ama yutimu it'aman and all this other vocabulary. You'll get that later. It will come. But right now you just need to know that al-mat'am, restaurant, and then put it into a sentence. Akaltu dajajatan fil mat'am. Akaltu ruzan fil mat'am. You'll remember it. Then it sticks in your head, and like whenever you see a restaurant, yeah, mat'am. That's the type of level that you want to get at in the beginning. Because that's all I'm talking about now is the first phase. So do that continuously, 6 months to a year, and you should have a strong amount of vocabulary. And trust me, you'll start to see yourself going past all the other people that are like doing different methods. And then inshallah, I'm gonna wrap it up for this week because I've already made this video long enough. And but just do that and just keep writing and make sure that you write out all the examples. And inshallah, tawfiq min Allah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, if He's written it for you, you're gonna get it. But you have to put in the hard work. And that's it. Inshallah, next week I'll try to talk about the next phase, like how to now to go into the more complex vocabulary, and also the reading and understanding what you're reading. And inshallah, I'll go over that next week. So subhanakallahumma wa bihamdik wa ashhadu an la ilaha illa ant astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk.